Thorfinn is finally pushed to a point where he has to enact violence against another person. The tension between Thorfinn and Einar grows even stronger, and Cordelia must face down a group of the Lanu all by herself. Chapter 207 of Vinland Saga certainly did not disappoint after a 2-month break from the last chapter, and we knew that this was the direction that it was going to go down, but I think there is a lot of really incredibly important stuff that's happening in this chapter for us to discuss, so let's get right into it. First thing, the chapter opens with, if you remember from the last time, Thorfinn, Einar, and Bug Eyes, the other Thorfinn, decided to kind of run away while the group of Lanu was distracted when they were at that meeting, and now they are being chased down by natives with arrows that are being pelted at them from a distance. The entire time, Hild was watching in the shadows, so this is the moment where it all kind of comes down. And the chapter opens with this incredible panel of just the arrow firing off, Thorfinn seeing it, having like 0.0002 seconds to react, and the first thing he does is try to protect the other two men that are with him, which I think just completely encapsulates Thorfinn's character, where in this moment, he's literally willing to sacrifice himself for them. And there's the moment where he creates as much spread as he possibly can. You know, he throws his cloak out, he throws his arms out, he's trying to protect his two friends, and he actually gets hit with the arrow, basically right around his heart. Now, I was a little bit confused when I was reading this. I was like, does he have like special padding under this or something? Like, what is going on? He mentions it a little bit later in the chapter that it hit his rib and it is affecting him. And I think this is important because when there is damage dealt in Vinland Saga, it is often for real and it often has long-term effects. The scars that are always drawn on Thorfinn's hands, or the one slash across his face that Snake did, or the fact that part of his ear is missing, every single piece of violence and damage that is inflicted on these characters has these long-term repercussions, right? We might not see Thorfinn kind of like in pain about all of his other ones, but Yukimura always kind of continues to draw the damage as time goes on. And he's not going to forget that Thorfinn was just pelted with an arrow, basically in his chest, saved by one of his ribs, probably cracking his rib in two, which affects him in the upcoming fight that happens a few panels later. But I also think that this panel of Thorfinn, you know, with his arms out, I mean, I don't think it's like Christ imagery or anything, but you could go there if you wanted to, of him protecting his two friends and getting hit in the heart, might be foreshadowing of potential outcomes for him to come in the future of the series. Now, again, as I always reiterate, I'm not a history buff, and I do not read this series with the intent of seeing how it stacks up to actual history. I know that, you know, there's different roads for the real historical Thorfinn to go down that he did, that, you know, this Thorfinn could definitely follow, that we're following in the manga. But at the end of the day, this is Yukimura's interpretation of that story, and he could still do whatever he wanted with these characters. I don't know if that would upset a bunch of the history buffs, but I think there's still potential that Thorfinn could wind up sacrificing himself to save some of these characters in the future chapters. And the reason I think that too is because it displays the difference between using yourself for defense as opposed to attack. It would also parallel what happened to Thor's, how he was taken down by arrows, right? And he was taken down in an attempt to protect those that were around him, basically sacrificing himself so that the others could go. Now, if we lead Vinland Saga down this path, we could get to a point where the Lanu attack the Norsemen. They're stuck by the shoreline, and we could have a moment where Thorfinn literally goes out and sacrifices himself so that they could escape, paralleling the death of Thor's. I don't necessarily think that's what's going to happen, but you could definitely see this as symbolism of maybe things to come, or maybe he will be in a similar situation as Thor's, and he'll be able to handle it slightly differently and actually manage to survive. So maybe he will be pushed into a very, very similar situation, but managed to find some kind of way out of it that Thor's could not. I don't know, but that was just my first thought when I saw Thorfinn get hit by the arrow. The next thing I love is that Thorfinn immediately goes to take down the attackers because he knows that he can't allow them any time to reload the bow. And this is a moment that I think is really, really important because a lot of people, you know, have been, you know, conflicted about Thorfinn's ideology and him not wanting to use violence and everything. And I think that when it comes to Thorfinn using violence, it is that last resort. It is the sense that you have to be within that life or death situation to try to do whatever you can to avoid it. But he's not just going to let them die. You know, he's not going to let his friends die. He's not going to let them get pelted with arrows. So he's going to do something about it. And the only thing that he can do in this situation is try to take them down. And I really, really love the way it's depicted. I mean, not only is the artwork just super cool to just see Thorfinn kind of like, barreling into action, but the way the panels were set up also I thought was really, really clever. I have the manga over to the side here. So the first thing he does is take the first guy down with a kick. When he does that, the damage from the arrow, affects him. So the way that he twists his body, he feels it. The adrenaline is high, so he was able to do that first charge. But after he felt it, he was about to topple over, and he was just about to be stabbed by the second guy's spear, only in the last moment saved by Hild. And we know that Hild has been watching in the wings this entire time, waiting for a moment to either protect them or to come out. And it's only because of Hild that he was able to take down the other two attackers, because if she had not intervened, he would have got stabbed by the spear. So this calls into mind, the whole redemption arc of Thorfinn and the dynamic between Thorfinn and Hild, because Hild was originally the one that wanted to kill Thorfinn for what he's done, and because of who Thorfinn is as a person, and because of her kind of witnessing his journey and seeing that progression of his character, she was pretty much completely won over to his side and was able to forgive him for doing pretty much the most horrible act you could possibly do to someone. Then Thorfinn tries to make the smartest decision that he can, saying that he is going to stay here and try to stop the Lanu from getting any closer to the camp that the Norsemen are at, telling Einar and the other Thorfinn to move ahead forward, which is smart because he wants to stop any conflict from reaching the compound. He wants them to be safe, but at the same time, he does not know what is currently happening at their village and how they are being attacked and how the houses are being burned by a group of kind of renegade natives that have taken it upon themselves to attack first. And when it comes to war breaking out, you always have to wonder who drew first blood. Who was the first side to attack and break that semblance of peace that, people had before the war broke out. So what's really interesting about the way that Yukimura writes things is that everything is very, very nuanced, even though Thorfinn, specifically, his ideology seems to be very, very black and white. Yukimura does not write the world of Vinland Saga in black and white. He very, very much coats it in shades of gray, which is something that I've always appreciated about his writing and the way that he makes characters, because there is no really good or evil. There are definitely horrendously evil actions that happen and people trying to do good, but depending on the situation that they're in, everything is very nuanced, and I like the way that he writes it that way, because you could look at the Norsemen being the first ones to draw blood because of Ivyar, but that was in an attempt to defend Thorfinn, who he didn't know could defend himself. So could you say it was actually the Lanu that did it? But then also on the other side, the Lanu are definitely the first people to shoot off an arrow at Thorfinn here, and the other tribe kind of burning down the houses, so you could definitely say that that was first blood as well. So you could look at it from either direction, and I like that there's no clear set answer. And you could also look at the disease spreading and breaking out, and the confusion and paranoia of that also building up, the reasoning here. There's a lot of different reasons for the conflict to happen here that nobody could have possibly predicted, and you can't really point a single finger at one thing, which is what I like about this. Now, there also seems to be some conflict here between Thorfinn and Einar, because Thorfinn starts saying, hey, this is the best thing to do. You two go back, hold up, within the walls. We'll try to fend them off here, yada, yada. And Einar is just like, we're not your underlings. I like that he said that. Like, that's a very powerful line, because Thorfinn has been kind of the leader, this entire time getting to Vinland. But Einar has always been right there. It's like those two started this journey together in the slave arc. And yes, Thorfinn is more skilled and experienced, but Einar's more skilled and experienced in other things. Like, he would never be able to grow a functioning town, be able to farm the way that he did, if not for Einar's influence and his knowledge of how to do those things. And it was those two that decided to go to Vinland and create this village together. And I think that's a really important thing to remember. It's not just Thorfinn. It was Thorfinn and Einar together that decided to do this. And now they have different objectives of what's to happen here, because Thorfinn wants to vacate and Einar's like, no, we spent all this time, traveled across the ocean, dealt with all this pain, anguish, all this manpower to create this village. We're not just going to leave. And so there's this huge tension between these two characters right now, and I really, really like that. And I also like this kind of, it's not that they, you could tell that Einar still appreciates and values Thorfinn. The first thing he says when he gets hit with the arrow is we need to get you medical attention. Let's go. They both care about each other, but there's this huge conflict right now. And what I see happening is if Einar goes back to the village, and Thorfinn is away, you know, he's going to see what's happening over there. And, you know, they might start a whole like retaliation because Ivyar is there and, you know, his dudes are there and all the other guys are there. They're not going to settle for this. They're not going to accept this, right? And so Einar might be part of that group that basically decides that we're going to go a hit back harder rather than just, you know, defend themselves, which would be, you know, in direct contrast to Thorfinn. So I don't know. That's kind of what I see happening there. Now, the other huge tension building moment is that Gudrid is giving birth during all of this, and the only person outside to defend her is Cordelia. Now, with the ending of this chapter, I want to say personally, I think this was an extremely smart decision by Yukimura. Because what happens is Cordelia sees these men coming, and she knows nobody else here can defend Gudrid, right? She knows that she's super strong. And she has the genetics to do it. She's got the Thorkel inside of her, right? So she tells them all to go inside. And the group of natives come here to see her. And they're all just like, yo, this dude's huge. Like, what the fuck is going on? You know what I mean? Like, that was kind of, it was like a small, like, tension breaking moment where they're just like, look how big this guy is. But she gets ready to try to attack them. And then something happens. They attack first. She gets hit with an arrow. And she begins to cower in fear and have all of these kind of traumatic, you know, memories basically of what she was originally born. You know, it was going to be born and bred, like Thorkel's son is going to grow up to be this great warrior. And she was protected by, you know, basically like fabricating that she was a girl and then raised as a girl so that she could be safe and away from this kind of pain and torment of war of what Thorkel would want to throw her into, right? So I think, and I don't know how other people are going to feel about this, but I think it was a really smart move to have her cower in fear when this violence eventually broke out. Because Vinland Saga, although it is fiction, has very much been realistic about the way that it depicts war and violence, because that is the heaviest core theme of the series. Is about how this affects the lives of people and the seriousness of it, right? And you take a character that, although she is physically extremely strong, you know, she could out deadlift any of these characters that are attacking her. She's never had any experience fighting. She's never been trained fighting. She's never been in this kind of situation. She's never been attacked like this. She's never been face to face with other warriors. Nobody ever taught her how to be strong in this moment. She defaults to wanting to be safe and protected because that is the way that she was raised. And to have her just kind of like have a rage boost and like immediately defeat all these characters because she's strong would be, I think, a ridiculous like shonen direction to go to. Not that I don't like shonen, but it would just feel too fabricated. It would feel too forced. I think the reaction that she has here is completely in line with the situation at hand. And I honestly respect Yukimura for going this way. Now, having said that, it's not that I don't think that she will get some kind of adrenaline boost or maybe be able to take out one of these characters, but it's the fact that she's never been in this situation, right? And I also think this goes into the problem with Thorfinn's ideology. Although on the surface, it is a very admirable and respectful way to go, if you don't teach people how to defend themselves if violence happens, then they will only be capable of being a victim, which is what is happening here. She has no training. She has no experience. She doesn't know self-defense. She was protected. And although she is strong, what can she do with that strength if she doesn't know how to use it? And I think that's just like one of the things that Thorfinn should have done from the beginning, is he should have trained people in self-defense. Or at least given like parameters of what to do. What do you do if people are coming to attack you? Where do you run to? Where do we go to? Should we have a safe place to run to? Should we have, you know, a precaution of some sort, right? And Ivyar's idea of like putting up these walls might have been too extreme, but he was at least thinking of like protection. Like, what do we do if the shit goes down? What do we do if we can't talk our way out of it? And Cordelia doesn't know. She stood up, she stood her ground, she tried, but when that real violence happened, she reacted in a way that 99% of people would act. If you haven't been through war, if you haven't been through training, if you haven't been in real battles, she reacted realistically. And I just thought that was such a great decision from like a writing standpoint, in my opinion. Now, what's going to happen here is I don't think Cordelia is going to die. And like I said, I do think if she does get like an adrenaline boost of some sort, maybe she'll attack one character. But what I really think is going to happen is that I think Ivyar is going to save her. Because Ivyar is not a bad guy. Again, the way Yukimura writes is very nuanced, right? There are no evil people and good people. Ivyar is not a bad person. He's just misguided and naive because he's also never experienced this. Now, again, what is he going to be able to do against a bunch of people that seem to be trained? Or they might not be, you know, they might just be using arrows as a way to, like, you know, take down people quickly without having any kind of real warrior skill themselves. So who knows? But if Ivyar does save her, because I don't think Ivyar wouldn't wish anything bad against her. And Ivyar, you know, his whole idea is wanting to, you know, protect these people. But he has this, like, false idealization of violence. And this might be his first introduction to that, too. He might kind of jump in to save her, experience real violence the same way, and understand, like, this is something we don't want. But at the same time, you know, Inar comes back. Ivyar is there. He saved people. So I can kind of see this thing going, like, if Ivyar saves her and people rally behind him and Einar comes back and tells everybody what's going on, we might have this confliction where everybody turns against Thorfinn because they see this oncoming war happening and they need to do something about it. And then I could also see from there Thorfinn returning and somehow sacrificing himself, similar to Thor's, for them to escape. That's kind of the direction I see the story going. I hope I'm wrong, but that's kind of like, just reading this chapter, that's where my mind's at right now. Anyways, if you guys have read chapter 207 of Vinland Saga, tell me what you think about it. I thought this chapter was incredibly engaging and just really, really well done all around. Definitely really enjoyed it. So let me know what you guys think. Leave your thoughts, theories, comments, opinions down below. If you like this review, give it a thumbs up and a comment because it will help it out in the algorithm. Other than that, guys, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. I'll talk to you next time.